There are moments in life, aren't there, when a seemingly insignificant object, a forgotten trinket, can unlock a door to a past so profound, so utterly devastating, it redefines everything you thought you knew. Imagine a quiet afternoon, the sun dappling through the leaves in a familiar park, a place where children laugh, lovers stroll, and the elderly find solace on benches. A scene of perfect tranquility. But what if, hidden beneath that veneer of peace, something dark, something terribly, irrevocably lost, was waiting to be found? Our story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper carried on the wind, echoing through the rustling leaves of Elmwood Park, a place nestled in the heart of a bustling city, yet often overlooked, a verdant pocket of calm amidst the urban sprawl. It was there on an ordinary Tuesday that a woman named Eleanor Vance, a woman whose life had, until that moment, been a tapestry woven with threads of quiet routine and predictable contentment, stumbled upon something that would unravel her entire existence. Eleanor, a librarian by profession, possessed a keen eye for detail, a mind accustomed to cataloging and organizing the vast narratives of human experience. At 58, with spectacles perched perpetually on her nose and a sensible, comfortable gait, she was the epitome of unassuming grace. Her hair, a cascade of silver streaked with remnants of its former chestnut glory, was usually tied back in a neat bun, but today, a few rebellious strands framed a face that held the gentle lines of a life well lived. Eleanor wasn't searching for anything extraordinary that afternoon. She was simply indulging in her ritualistic post-work walk, a habit she'd cultivated over decades, a way to decompress from the hushed solemnity of the library. Her path usually led her past the rose garden, a riot of color and fragrance, and then along the meandering stream, its gentle gurgle a soothing balm to her soul. But today, a playful gust of wind, almost as if guided by an unseen hand, nudged a discarded newspaper from a bench, sending it tumbling towards a dense thicket of overgrown azaleas near the old oak tree, the very tree where, local legend had it, a young couple once carved their initials over a century ago. A trivial detail, perhaps, but it's these trivialities, these seemingly random occurrences, that often serve as the first domino in a chain reaction of fate. As Eleanor reached to retrieve the paper, her gaze fell upon a glint of tarnished silver nestled amongst the emerald green leaves. It was small, no bigger than her thumb, and almost entirely obscured by the undergrowth. Curiosity, a trait well honed in a librarian, tugged at her. With a practiced ease, she knelt, pushing aside the branches, and there it was. A locket. Not just any locket, but one utterly consumed by time, its surface oxidized to a dull, almost black hue, its delicate engravings barely discernible. It felt heavy in her palm, surprisingly so for its size, as if it held not just memories, but a concentrated essence of untold stories. A chill, despite the warm afternoon, snaked its way up Eleanor's spine. This wasn't a cheap trinket, discarded thoughtlessly. This was something cherished, something lost, something with a history that practically hummed with an unspoken resonance. The clasp, stiff with age, resisted her initial attempts to open it. She could feel the faint tremor in her fingers as she worked, a strange sense of urgency compelling her. Finally, with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet of the park, the locket sprang open. Inside, two miniature, faded photographs lay nestled, preserved by the embrace of the tarnished metal. The left side held the image of a young woman, her face framed by soft waves of dark hair, a hint of a smile playing on her lips, her eyes, even in the faded sepia, radiating a quiet strength. On the right, a man equally young, with a strong jawline and eyes that held a depth beyond his years. He had a slight, almost imperceptible scar above his left eyebrow, a tiny detail that, for some inexplicable reason, etched itself into Eleanor's memory. They looked, to Eleanor, like something out of an old romance novel, a picture of youthful love, frozen in time. But there was something else. Tucked beneath the photographs, almost hidden from view, was a tiny, intricately folded piece of paper. It was so delicate, so brittle, that Eleanor feared it might crumble to dust if she wasn't careful. With bated breath, she carefully unfurled it. The handwriting, though faint and somewhat spidery, was clear enough to read. A single date, October 27th, 1968, and below it, a name, scrawled with an almost desperate urgency. To my dearest Clara, always and forever. J. Clara. J. October 27th, 1968. The words resonated in Eleanor's mind, a cryptic message from the past. The year, 1968, immediately placed it firmly in a tumultuous era of American history, a time of profound social and political upheaval. What story did this locket hold? What tragedy or triumph was encapsulated within its tarnished embrace? The faces in the photographs, once vibrant with life, now seemed to gaze out at her, silently pleading for their story to be told. Eleanor felt an irresistible pull, a profound connection to these unknown individuals. It was more than mere curiosity. It was an innate sense of duty, a librarian's instinct to preserve and understand the narratives of the past. She clutched the locket in her hand, the metal now warm against her skin, as if it had awakened from a long slumber. The peaceful park suddenly felt different, imbued with a new, unsettling energy. The laughter of children seemed distant. The rustling leaves now sounded like whispers of untold secrets. Eleanor, usually so grounded in the tangible world of books and facts, found herself stepping onto the precipice of a mystery that promised to be far more compelling and far more dangerous than any she had ever encountered within the pages of a novel. Her quiet life, carefully constructed over decades, felt, in that moment, as if it were poised to fracture. The locket was a key, she realized, not just to a forgotten past, but perhaps to a future she could never have envisioned. She rose from her kneeling position, the old oak tree casting long shadows over her, a silent witness to the beginning of her profound entanglement. The locket, once an abandoned relic, was now a harbinger, a silent scream from a forgotten time, about to echo through the present. And Eleanor, the unassuming librarian, was about to become its unwitting guardian, drawn into a narrative far grander and infinitely more heartbreaking than she could ever have imagined. The truth, she sensed, lay buried deep, waiting to be unearthed, and she was, for better or worse, the one destined to find it. The locket felt like a living thing in Eleanor's hand, a small, cold weight radiating a peculiar warmth, a silent testament to lives lived and loves lost. The simple act of finding it had irrevocably shifted her world, transforming an ordinary afternoon into the precipice of an unforeseen journey. As she made her way home, the park, once a sanctuary, now seemed to pulse with an almost unsettling vibrancy. Every rustle of leaves, every distant murmur of conversation, felt charged with hidden meaning. Her apartment, usually a haven of quiet contemplation, felt strangely hollow, as if waiting to be filled with the echoes of the past she now carried. That evening, the locket became her singular obsession. Spread out on her sturdy oak dining table, under the soft glow of her reading lamp, were the faded photographs and the fragile slip of paper. Clara. J. October 27, 1968. The names and dates swam before her eyes, demanding context, demanding a voice. Eleanor, a woman who meticulously cross-referenced historical texts and spent hours poring over microfilm, knew this was no ordinary lost item. This was a puzzle, intricately crafted by fate, and she, a humble librarian, was now its reluctant solver. Her research began methodically, a librarian's natural instinct kicking in. The year 1968, a year etched in collective memory, marked by seismic shifts. The assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, the escalating Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, the counterculture blooming across the nation. A time of hope, but also of profound disillusionment. Eleanor started by cross-referencing local newspaper archives from that period, specifically looking for any unusual occurrences around Elmwood Park. She searched for missing persons reports, unexplained disappearances, anything that might connect to a young couple, Clara and Jay, on that specific date. Days bled into weeks. Eleanor found herself consumed, her usual routines gently pushed aside. Library hours were spent not just on patron requests, but on surreptitiously searching digital databases. Evenings at home were a blur of microfilm reels and dusty historical society records. She unearthed fragments of everyday life from 1968. Advertisements for soda, headlines screaming about student protests, obituaries of local figures. But no Clara, no Jay, no tragic accident in Elmwood Park. The silence surrounding them was deafening, unsettling. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only that solitary locket. The more she searched, the more she felt an unusual connection to the faces in the locket. The young woman, Clara, had eyes that reminded Eleanor of her own mother's, a quiet resilience that hinted at depths unspoken. And Jay, the man with the slight scar, his gaze, even in the faded sepia, held an intensity, a fierce protectiveness. Who were they? Why did their story remain so stubbornly hidden? Eleanor found herself talking to them, quietly, as she worked, urging them to reveal their secrets, to break the silence of decades. Then, one rainy Tuesday, almost a month after her discovery, a serendipitous whisper from the past finally broke through. Deep within the dusty archives of the local historical society, in a collection of old community newsletters from the late 60s, Eleanor stumbled upon an article. It wasn't a headline, not a front-page exposé. It was a small, almost dismissible notice on page 3 of the Elmwood Community Chronicle, dated November 1968. The heading, innocuous enough, read, "Local Talent Showcase Postponed." Beneath it, a brief paragraph mentioned the unexpected and indefinite postponement of the annual Elmwood Park Talent Showcase, originally scheduled for late October. The reason cited was vague: unforeseen circumstances involving a key participant, and then a name, Clara Peterson, and a brief, almost clinical mention that her fiancé, Julian Thorne, also a participant, had left town unexpectedly shortly after. Clara Peterson, Julian Thorne. The names struck Eleanor like a bolt of lightning. Clara and Jay. The same initials, the same time frame, and the critical detail. They were connected to Elmwood Park, the very place the locket was found. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a coincidence. This was it. The first solid thread in a tangled web. The article, brief as it was, suggested a sudden, unexplained departure for Julian Thorne. Why would a fiancé, engaged to Clara Peterson and set to perform in a talent showcase, simply leave town without explanation? And what unforeseen circumstances involving Clara led to the postponement? The vague wording, the quick dismissal, only fueled Eleanor's suspicion. She dug deeper into the newsletters, cross-referencing the names. She found a mention of Clara Peterson, a talented vocalist, often performing at local church events and community gatherings. Julian Thorne, described as a promising young musician, a gifted guitarist. They were a beloved local couple, their future seemingly bright, intertwined with the fabric of the community. But then the trail went cold. After that November 1968 mention, Clara Peterson and Julian Thorne vanished from the Chronicle's pages. No marriage announcements, no obituaries, no further community news. It was as if they had been erased. The silence was not just unsettling now. It was chilling. This wasn't a couple who simply moved away quietly. This was something far more sinister. Eleanor felt a growing sense of dread. The locket, once a curiosity, now felt like an artifact of a crime, a silent witness to a story that had been deliberately buried. She looked again at the photographs. The youthful optimism in their eyes now seemed laced with an unacknowledged fragility, a shadow of what was to come. That slight scar above Julian's eyebrow seemed to deepen, becoming a mark of a burden carried, a secret kept. The next step was clear, though daunting. She needed to find living connections, perhaps family members, old friends, anyone who might remember Clara Peterson and Julian Thorne, anyone who could shed light on their sudden disappearance. This meant stepping outside the hallowed halls of the library and the dusty archives, venturing into the labyrinthine world of human memory, a world far less organized and predictable than her beloved Dewey Decimal System. as she meticulously copied down the names and dates. A detail she'd initially dismissed resurfaced with unsettling clarity. The article mentioned the talent showcase was scheduled for late October. The Locket's inscription, October 27, 1968. The dates were almost identical. Had something happened on that very day or just before that shattered their lives? A cold certainty settled in Eleanor's stomach. The locket wasn't merely a memento. It was a cry for help, a desperate plea from the past, left in a place where it might one day be found. And Eleanor, the quiet librarian, was now not just an accidental finder, but a reluctant detective, pulled into a cold case that stretched across 5 decades. A case whispering of betrayal, loss, and a truth that refused to stay buried. The serene park, the symbol of tranquility, was in fact the silent stage for a forgotten drama, and Eleanor was about to pull back the curtain. The revelation about Clara Peterson and Julian Thorne, the names finally attached to the faded faces in the locket, was a jolt, a surge of adrenaline that cleared away weeks of fruitless searching. Eleanor felt it deep in her bones. This wasn't just a historical curiosity anymore. This was a human story, raw and unresolved, screaming to be heard across the decades. The locket, once a mute artifact, now vibrated with the silent agony of unanswered questions. Her next move was clear. She had to find someone who remembered them. Armed with the scant information from the old community newsletter, Eleanor started her new quest. This was far more challenging than poring over archives. It meant venturing into the unpredictable terrain of human memory, a landscape dotted with faded recollections, half-forgotten details, and sometimes inconvenient truths. She began with the oldest residents of Elmwood, those who would have lived there in 1968, knocking on doors, attending community senior luncheons, even joining a local historical walking tour, subtly steering conversations towards the topic of the Elmwood Community Chronicle and the talent showcase of that year. It was slow, painstaking work. Many remembered the showcase, a popular annual event, but the specifics were hazy. Some recalled a lovely young singer named Clara, or that charming guitarist Julian, but the details surrounding their abrupt disappearance remained elusive, often met with shrugs or vague comments about them moving away suddenly. It was frustrating, like trying to catch smoke. People were either genuinely forgetful or, Eleanor suspected, reluctant to speak about something perhaps uncomfortable, something perhaps best left buried. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, while volunteering at a local charity bake sale, a clever tactic to meet more long-term residents, Eleanor struck gold. She found Martha Higgins, a woman in her early 80s with eyes as sharp as tacks and a memory like a steel trap. Martha, a former school secretary, had lived in Elmwood her entire life and, as luck would have it, had been part of the talent showcase organizing committee back in '68. Eleanor approached her with carefully phrased questions, slowly, gently leading the conversation. Martha, initially cautious, seemed to sense Eleanor's genuine interest. Clara Peterson, Martha mused, her gaze drifting. Oh, that sweet girl, voice like an angel. And Julian, a real charmer, that one, always had a twinkle in his eye. A flicker of sadness crossed Martha's face. Such a lovely couple. Everyone thought they'd be married by Christmas. Eleanor's heart quickened. What happened to them, Martha? The newsletter mentioned the showcase was postponed because of unforeseen circumstances involving Clara, and Julian left town. Martha sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of decades. It was a terrible time, dear. Terrible time. They just vanished. One day they were here, the next gone. No goodbyes, no word. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Rumors, of course. Always rumors. Some said Julian got cold feet, ran off. Others said Clara had an accident, a fall in the park. Martha paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. But I never believed that. Clara was too careful. And Julian, he loved her. I saw it. It wasn't just puppy love. What kind of rumors, Martha? Eleanor pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. Martha looked around, as if worried someone might overhear. Well, there was talk. Hush talk. Mind you, about Clara being pregnant. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Pregnant. The image of the youthful Clara in the locket, her quiet smile, suddenly took on a heartbreaking poignancy. And Julian? Some said he denied it, others said he embraced it. The truth, dear, is that no one truly knew. They were very private about their relationship, despite being so popular. And then, the day before the showcase, that's when everything went wrong. The day before? Eleanor leaned forward, her entire being focused on Martha. Yes, October 26, 1968. I remember it clearly. The final rehearsal was set for that evening in the park bandshell. Julian was supposed to pick Clara up from her home beforehand, but he never arrived. And Clara, she never showed up at the rehearsal either. Martha's voice was filled with an old, lingering confusion. We tried to call them, but their lines were dead. The next morning, news spread like wildfire. They were gone. Just gone. Eleanor felt a cold dread creep over her. October 26th, the day before the Locket's inscription date. Did anyone look for them? The police. Martha nodded slowly. Oh yes, the police were called. They searched, questioned everyone. Julian's family, Clara's parents. Heartbroken they were, but nothing. No leads, no trace. After a few weeks, it just faded. Became one of those local mysteries that everyone talks about for a while, then quietly sweeps under the rug. Too painful, I suppose. Clara's parents, Eleanor whispered. Are they still alive? A profound sadness settled on Martha's face. No, dear. Both passed away many years ago. They never got over it, never found peace. Clara was their only child. Eleanor's heart ached for them. The weight of the locket in her pocket suddenly felt heavier, charged with the unfulfilled hopes of a family torn apart. Did anyone ever find out anything more? A secret? A fight? Anything? Martha hesitated, then lowered her voice even further. There was one thing, a rumor again, but this one, it felt different. It was about Clara's uncle, Arthur Benson. He was a very powerful man in the city, very influential. He was vehemently against Clara and Julian's relationship. Said Julian wasn't good enough for her. Not from the right family. He made no secret of his disapproval. Martha's eyes met Eleanor's, a knowing, almost fearful look in them. Some whispered that he might have had something to do with their disappearance, that he had the means and the motive to make them disappear. The air around Eleanor seemed to thicken. Uncle Arthur Benson, powerful man, motive. The pieces, disparate and chilling, were beginning to click into place, forming a terrifying mosaic. A forbidden love, an unplanned pregnancy, a disapproving, powerful uncle, and then silence. A silence that had endured for over 5 decades. Eleanor thanked Martha, her mind reeling. The locket wasn't just about a lost love. It was about a hidden truth, a potential crime that had gone unpunished. The beautiful, serene Elmwood Park, where she had found the locket, suddenly felt like a burial ground for secrets, its beauty a deceptive veil. As she drove home, the image of Arthur Benson, a name she'd never heard before, began to dominate her thoughts. A powerful man capable of making people disappear. Was he still alive? What connections did he have? The scale of this mystery had just ballooned, transforming from a historical inquiry into something far more dangerous, far more personal. Eleanor felt a surge of fear, a cold hand gripping her stomach. She was no longer a detached observer. She was an active participant, and the secrets she was unearthing were not merely historical facts, but fragments of lives violently disrupted, screaming for justice. The locket was no longer just a key. It was a silent accusation, leading her into a labyrinth where the echoes of a tragic past were growing louder, promising to shake the foundations of everything she held dear. The name Arthur Benson hung in the air, a chilling echo in Eleanor's mind, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of Elmwood Park's tranquil facade. The casual, almost whispered warning from Martha Higgins had transformed the historical curiosity into a full-blown cold case, one now fraught with the very real possibility of a powerful, dangerous man at its center. Eleanor, the quiet librarian, found herself on the cusp of a truth far more sinister than any fictional mystery she'd ever encountered. The locket, clutched in her hand, felt less like a relic and more like a live wire, pulsing with the weight of decades of untold injustice. Her first task was to verify Arthur Benson's existence and, more importantly, his current status. A quick search revealed that Arthur Bartholomew Benson had been a prominent, highly influential figure in the city's legal and business circles throughout the latter half of the 20th century. He was known for his iron will, his vast network of connections, and his ruthless pursuit of his objectives. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep just 5 years prior, at the ripe old age of 92, leaving behind a substantial estate and a legacy of philanthropy that, to Eleanor, now seemed suspiciously untainted. His death, a seemingly natural end, only intensified Eleanor's unease. The perpetrator, if he was one, was beyond earthly justice. But a name, even a deceased one, was a trail. Eleanor shifted her focus to Arthur Benson's past associates, his law firm, his family. She found mentions of his surviving nephew, Richard Benson, a man in his late 60s who had inherited much of Arthur's business empire. Richard, unlike his late uncle, kept a lower profile, but his name appeared on various local charity boards and occasional social columns. Eleanor knew instinctively that Richard was her next, and perhaps final, lead. Gaining an audience with Richard Benson was no easy feat. Eleanor, using her librarian's resourcefulness and a dash of well-placed persistence, eventually secured a brief appointment under the guise of researching a local history project, hoping to gain insight into the Benson family's contributions to Elmwood. Richard, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow and an air of guarded politeness, met her in his opulent downtown office. The room was grand, filled with dark wood and framed certificates, a stark contrast to Eleanor's quiet library. The conversation was initially cordial, if a little stiff. Eleanor subtly steered the topic towards the 1960s, mentioning the talent showcase, and then, with a carefully modulated voice, brought up Clara Peterson and Julian Thorne. Richard's demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly. His eyes, though still polite, hardened. A flicker of something, recognition, annoyance, crossed his face. "Ah, yes," he said, his voice a little colder. "Clara and Julian. A regrettable incident. My uncle was very fond of Clara, you see. Her parents were old family friends. He tried to warn her about that young man. Julian, wasn't it? Not a suitable match at all." He paused, a dismissive wave of his hand. "They simply ran off, I suppose. Eloped. It was common enough back then with all the rebellious youth." A phase. "My uncle was quite disappointed, of course. He had high hopes for Clara." Eleanor felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Ran off?" she challenged gently, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "There were rumors, Mr. Benson, of a different nature. Whispers that Clara was pregnant, and that your uncle, Arthur, was quite displeased with their relationship." Richard's composure finally cracked. His jaw tightened. "Rumors are just that, madam. Idle gossip. My uncle was a man of impeccable character. He would never resort to anything untoward." His voice rose, a hint of anger creeping in. Clara's disappearance was a tragedy, yes, but to insinuate anything more is an insult to his memory. Eleanor knew she was close. She reached into her bag, pulling out the locket. She placed it on the polished mahogany table between them, the tarnished silver catching the overhead light, a silent, eloquent challenge. "Then perhaps, Mr. Benson," she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper, "you can explain this. Found in Elmwood Park. Dated October 27, 1968. To my dearest Clara, always and forever. J." Richard's eyes fell upon the locket. For a long moment he simply stared, his face draining of color. The guarded politeness evaporated, replaced by a raw, naked fear. He picked up the locket, his fingers trembling, turning it over and over. He opened it, revealing the faded photographs of Clara and Julian. His gaze lingered on Julian's image, specifically on the tiny scar above his eyebrow. A gasp escaped his lips, barely audible. "No," he breathed. It can't be. What is it, Mr. Benson? Eleanor pressed, her heart pounding. Richard looked up, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to age him decades. That scar, he whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the photograph. Julian, he got that scar in a fight, a few weeks before they disappeared. With my uncle. Eleanor froze. With Arthur Benson? Richard nodded, his voice hoarse. Yes, my uncle found out about Clara's pregnancy. He was furious. He confronted Julian, told him to leave Clara, to leave town. Julian refused. There was a struggle. My uncle, he could be a very violent man when provoked. He hit Julian. That scar. It was from my uncle's signet ring. The pieces slammed into place with horrifying clarity. The forbidden love, the pregnancy, the powerful, disapproving uncle, the fight, and then the silence. What happened, Mr. Benson? Eleanor demanded, her voice firm, unwavering. Tell me, what did your uncle do? Tears welled in Richard's eyes, decades of suppressed guilt finally breaking free. My uncle, he orchestrated everything. He was obsessed with maintaining the family's reputation, with controlling Clara's future. He couldn't abide the scandal of an unwed mother, especially not with Julian, whom he considered beneath her. He paid off the police, local officials. He had contacts everywhere. He made it look like they ran away. He convinced Clara's parents, devastated as they were, that it was the only way to avoid public disgrace. And Clara? And Julian? Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. Richard buried his face in his hands. Clara, she was taken away, to a private facility, far from here, to have the baby in secret. My uncle arranged it all. Julian was confronted again, forcibly, the day before the showcase. My uncle, he threatened Julian's family. He told him if he didn't disappear, if he didn't leave Clara, his family would suffer. Julian, he was a good man. He loved Clara too much to see his family hurt. He left. A profound sorrow washed over Eleanor. Clara forced away. Julian driven out by threats. And the baby. What about the baby? She asked, her voice barely audible. Richard looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. It was a girl. She was given up for adoption. My uncle handled it. He ensured no one would ever connect her to Clara or Julian. He wanted to erase every trace. Eleanor felt a wave of dizziness. A girl, given up for adoption. 50 years ago, the weight of the locket was crushing now, not just with sorrow, but with a terrifying realization. She had always felt a strange, inexplicable connection to this story, a resonance that went beyond mere empathy. The dates, the park, the profound sense of loss. Do you know where the baby was adopted? Eleanor asked, her voice a strained whisper. Richard shook his head. No, my uncle handled all the paperwork personally. He kept everything meticulously private. All I know is she was placed in a family out of state. He never spoke of it again. Eleanor closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. The pieces clicked into the most devastating, unimaginable place. Her own adoption, the whispers in her childhood about being found, about her birth parents being unknown. The dates. Her own birthday was October 27th, and she had been found as an infant, abandoned not in Elmwood, but in a small-town orphanage miles away, yet close enough that the connections might have been deliberately obscured. The locket in her hand, the faded images of Clara and Julian, now looked back at her with startling familiarity. Clara, the quiet resilience in her eyes. Julian, the fierce protectiveness. It wasn't just empathy she felt. It was an ancestral echo. Thank you, Mr. Benson, Eleanor managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. She rose, clutching the locket, the answers a bittersweet, soul-shattering burden. She was not just the finder of the locket. She was the missing piece, the child of Clara and Julian, reunited with her parents' memory through a twist of fate. The locket wasn't just the key to her past. It was her past. And so, the truth, buried for decades, finally saw the light. A tragic love story, torn apart by societal pressures and the ruthless will of a powerful man. A baby, separated from her roots, only to find them again, half a century later, through a tarnished piece of silver. Eleanor, the quiet librarian, had found more than just a historical mystery. She had found herself a daughter of a forbidden love, a testament to enduring hope and the power of truth to finally emerge. The weight of the story, the depth of its emotion, is truly profound, isn't it? If the story resonated with you, if you felt the chill of the mystery and the warmth of the reunion, then please take a moment. Like this video, your likes help us share these incredible, untold stories with more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single thread of these captivating tales. We're on a journey to uncover the hidden histories all around us, and your support makes it all possible. Join our community, and let's keep digging for the truth, one lost artifact, one forgotten whisper, at a time. Thank you for watching.